Alright, hello and welcome everyone to another Super Boss guide. Of course, we have previously covered the Super Tank slash Apex Tank, which awards the accolades you see on the left here, but you guys did want to see the video on the new Super MURMUR, also known as 60 Eyes, which awards the accolades that you see on the right six here. Those accolades are for and only for Protea, Sevagoth, Gauss, Jade, Mirage, and Voruna. They are not available for any other frames. They just literally don't exist. Maybe they will in the future, but at current time, it's just those six to, I guess, counter the six that are available for the Super Tank. And it is worth noting that these do need to be done solo. You can still get the special Simdali from this content by playing whatever frame you want and also with a party, but you need to be solo as these Warframes in order to get the accolade, and it must be on Steel Path, and of course you need to meet the conditions for the Super Boss to even show up. With that, we're going to go over the different builds and stuff I would suggest using for doing this. They are often very weird, and they're not the only way to do it, but they're what I found to be easiest whenever I was going through and grabbing all these. So let's just get right down to it, starting with the weapons we're going to be bringing. Now, I am expecting that you have a lot of the things in Warframe for this. They are the super bosses for a reason, so I'm going to assume that your gear is pretty good. For that, we are using the Torrid, as it is kind of the de facto best thing to be bringing to this for a variety of reasons. It's very good at the lead up to the fight, and it has an incredibly good ammo economy because it is an incarnate weapon and gets a lot of incarnate ammo for actually fighting the boss. The reason the ammo is a consideration is because it actually does not really matter how much damage you deal to the boss. You do need to do damage to the 60 Eyes, but because it is attenuated, it actually is more of a timer than it is a health bar, and doing more damage isn't going to make the fight go any faster. So you're looking for more consistent things that can give you like an endurance of a fight, where you're not really worried about your ammo, and you're just able to do one consistent thing for the full length of the fight and kind of wait it out. I know that's not very interesting, and that the tank is much, much more interesting than that, but it is the thing that we have to do to get these accolades if you want them. Of course, the build on the Torrid is pretty stock standard. This has been the case for a while. This is pretty much just what the build has been. If you don't know why Primed Firestorm is in here, this video is not about that, and I can make a different video about why that is. But this is just the usual build for the Torrid, and it'll serve you very, very well. With that, though, I do know that the Torrid is only available during certain weeks. So, of course, there is an alternative to it. The much easier to get alternative to it is the Ignis Wraith. This weapon is incredibly ammo efficient and stacks on heat procs, which can keep your DPS at a very even level over the course of the fight. And especially with the new primary Crux Arcane giving us 60% ammo efficiency, this weapon is in basically no risk whatsoever of running out of ammo, and it should have not much difficulty dealing with the crowds leading up to the actual fight itself, as you can kind of just spray it wherever you need to spray it, and it'll just burn things down. So this is also a very good weapon to bring. Obviously not as good as the Torrid, but because the Torrid is limited by, certain weeks of its availability, I did want to give you guys an alternative to that. Secondary-wise, the Latem's always available. If you do not have a Latem, your goal should not be this super boss. You should go get a fucking Latem. This weapon is obviously just incredible. It is relatively objectively, with some debate to be had, the best secondary in the game. It has a variety of extremely good builds. In terms of this, the one that I would suggest using is just kind of the lower level, not really lower level, different thing, much easier to use, a more elementally focused version of this that utilizes Cascadia Flare and is also less Forma than other options. It is worth noting that Prime Fulmination, not required for this at all. You can just totally drop this, and I believe this goes down like 2 Forma whenever you do that. So yeah, you don't need Prime Fulmination for this, but it is very helpful. You also don't need steady hands as long as you are doing the minus recoil here. If you do have steady hands installed, as I do, you can swap to more fire rate. Although, again, more fire rate is not going to help in this fight if you do decide to fight the boss with this weapon, because it only takes the damage that it takes and just time has to pass. With that, the other evolutions, though, are not really an option. They're kind of just what they are. On headshot, more reload speed, stacks 3 times, minus 10% critical chance, and then the 2000% damage on non-critical hits. These are all just kind of stock standard for this variant of the Latem. If you're using the crit Latem build, that's also going to be just fine. It really is just down to preference in this fight. As I said, damage doesn't really matter. Otherwise, though, we are bringing the Arca Titron. Many of you will remember this from the Wukong build recently, and it is doing pretty much that stuff. The reason the Arca Titron is so nice for this is it is a very, very large amount of upfront damage. That is going to be great for dealing with heavy units, and also because this is a weapon that is able to use influence, it can kill very large crowds very easily. Also, whenever you use influence with this weapon and just are smashing around, clearing out the enemies that will spawn around the boss, influence will put electric procs on the boss, making sure that you're keeping up damage as you just slam around and deal with those groups of enemies and get them out of your way. So it really all just comes together where, like, this slam build is very good. You could bring whatever melee weapon you really want. The Zorus is a very good option because you can just throw it from where you're going to be during this fight, which is very high up in the air. But the Titron's extremely large amounts of damage can clear out the enemy groups very quickly and makes a good panic button as well because you can, of course, slam in and roll out of it for rolling guard, making it very safe usually. Though the Zorus is keeping you far away, which is also a safety measure. But yeah, Archititron or the Zorus are both like very good choices for this. The Zorus build is right here if you do want to go that route. Whirlwind is not necessary, but it certainly does make it more comfortable. Otherwise, Companion, real quick, I do really like Worm. This is a Verglass build for Worm, so that Worm can help more with damage, but having access to Negate and Guardian on here and getting that a little bit more consistently is very nice. The Verglass is the usual suspects on here just so he can help burn down enemies around you, as the builds you're going to be bringing on the Warframes are going to be much worse and less Warframe focused than they usually are, so you're going to want as much backup for that as you can get. With that, backup for that, we have focus schools. Now, the focus school you're going to want to bring to this is the same as the one we used for the Apex tank. It is going to be Vazarin because of Protective Sling. Just being invincible for 5 seconds is really good. It's a fantastic panic button, and it's just it's a very, very powerful effect. It is super, super solid. More so than Protective Sling, though, because Protective Sling is useful during the boss fight, which I really don't find to be very difficult. Earlier than that, Unairu's passives are very, very helpful. Last Gasp can allow you to just get back up if enemies do down you. So if you have a good setup on your operator, like a 147 amp, or any just like nice powerful 7, any X47 pretty much falls into that category. Last Gasp is going to allow you to just stand back up in a lot of cases, and this can even be helpful during the fight itself whenever the ads start spawning. So if you have not leveled out Unairu and stuff, that can be very helpful. Speaking of alternatives to Unairu, though, in your companion slot, if you don't have Unairu, you can opt for a Vaska Kavat. So Vaska Kavats, the weird thing about them is that if you do get downed and your Vaska Kavat is dead, as it kind of normally will be, you can actually jump out with Last Gasp and go revive your Vaska Kavat, and then it'll revive you. So that's also an interesting way to stay alive if you have like a very low level Last Gasp, or if like you don't have a very good operator. So like, that's a thing that you can go for as well, and the Vaska does an okay job staying alive and theoretically could be built to do damage, though I wouldn't suggest it. So that's what we have going on there. In terms of Warframe builds, this is why we're doing this last, is because we're going to go over them all in a row. Things are going to look very, very weird as a warning, starting with Protea. Now, Protea normally, of course, is built for all kinds of things, but this is the build that you're going to see a kind of similar things to it a lot whenever we're showing this stuff off. First and foremost, this is Energy Siphon and Energy Nexus to make sure we have enough energy to cast abilities. We're on Prime Sure-Footed because being knocked down can get you killed very easily. And we're on Catalyzing Shields plus Rolling Guard, so just spamming whatever ability we can fills up our shields and makes us invincible, or we can roll and be invincible, which has a very significant uptime. Other than that, we have for shields, Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor. These are really, really good for making your shields just come back on their own. They come back very quickly, and you have very little delay between having not having shields and having shields, so that you're vulnerable for as little time as possible. The really, really weird mods in this build are Arrow Advantage, Patagium, and Boreal's Anguish. So these reduce gravity while aim gliding by 100%. This reduces gravity while aim gliding by 75% and gives you 60% aim glide and wall latch duration, and Patagium gives you 90% aim glide and wall latch duration. These mods basically never see play. But in this one specific case, the safest place in the arena is hovering above the boss. Just aim gliding above the boss, hanging out in the air, having shot him with a gun a little bit while the timer ticks down. I am so serious. That is the strategy for the fight, is to just chill in midair, and whenever your aim glide duration runs out, you touch the ground and you jump right back up, and then you aim glide again, and just give him a couple taps of shoots to keep the heat procs going, burning him down and killing him. and then using the Latum to kill any just like, little straggler Xmas enemies that walk into the fight. That is very seriously the strategy for this fight, because it is just an endurance thing. We just want to be in the place that makes us have to do the least, like running around, and the ground is more dangerous than the air. Other than that, we're on Arcane Steadfast, so we can cast a little bit more. This is probably like just completely unnecessary, and mostly it's a thing on Protea because you can cast your 1 for shield grenades. So if you have free cast of shield grenades, it's kind of better than just using catalyzing shields over and over and over, which is why this is here. You do need to pay attention for when you do get this buff, though, as of course, like, it's going to make your life much better whenever you have free grenades to be tossing out, because they're going to make you invincible, as Protea's 1 with shields is very good at doing. Other than that, Arcane Aegis, this makes you invincible for 12 seconds at a time whenever it procs, or effectively invincible whenever it procs, and that's just really good uptime. With that, we can move on to Sevagoth, though. Whenever you see the fight, these builds, I think, will all make more sense, as we are going to show one run of the fight when we get to the end of showing all the builds. Now, the second frame I did it with is Sevagoth. Sevagoth Prime, and we have the Super Murmur build right here. Things look exactly the same. As you can very clearly see, the big difference is that this is Nullifier instead of Steadfast. If you're not Protea, Nullifier is way, way more useful. Sevagoth doesn't have any ways to turn his shields back on, so just not getting nullified or any magnetic procs at all or any of that business is just going to be really nice and better. So Nullifier is very nice here. Otherwise, it's all the same. This is like the identical build. There's no differences. This is just what's up. You're going to cast an ability to put your shields back on with Brief Respite whenever you need to. Your shields are going to come back a bit faster naturally because of Fast Deflection and Vigilante. Otherwise, you're hovering in midair, doing rolling guard stuff, doing catalyzing shield stuff. Pretty simple, cut and dry. Moving on, we can move on to Gauss, who we did this with third. Gauss Prime here. This build is, hey, you guessed it, it's the same. This is like, had to be moved around a little bit for polarity cleanness. But otherwise, it's exactly the same thing as Sevagoth, just like very simple, hang out, hover in midair. It's worth noting that a big reason all of these are like so samey is because the boss, if it touches you, turns off all your abilities. So it's not like we can just use Gauss's 2 as we usually would for survivability. We kind of just like get broken down to that main level of like, oh, just shield gate and spam invincibility. That's why things look like this, if this is the point where you start wondering that. Moving on, we have Jade. Jade, of course, does have the benefit of getting 2 auras to work with. For that, we're using Brief Respite and Aerodynamic. Aerodynamic probably doesn't like really do a lot here in terms of its damage reduction, but the additional 6 seconds of Aim Glide, well, you get what you get. Again, your 4 gets turned off if you ever get touched while you're up in the air, which is like very annoying and also very high energy cost on a build like this. So everything else here is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. It's identical as it was before. Nullifier and Aegis are in here with all the usual suspects that I explained beforehand. Moving on, we have a Mirage. Mirage, going over here for the Super Murmur. Things look pretty much the same here. Of course, we don't have an X list just due to what my build is on Mirage. I just had to fit what I could fit. This was honestly still very easy. Mirage is very good. And Mirage's abilities are actually low cost enough that I found it was actually easier in the earlier parts of the mission where we were killing regular Murmur and stuff. Just like to use her abilities even on like their basic levels. It was totally fine. The only thing you're really losing out on here is you don't get to run Boreals for a little bit longer duration in the air, which just means that you're going to jump up a little bit more frequently, and it's not a huge deal. Moving on to our final one, we have Vauban. This is the run that I'm actually going to be showing, as it shows off a number of the different things that I've mentioned. This is, the build. Like, not very surprising, I know. And you can see that he's not even fully re-ranked back up to 30. The run that I did with him, I was leveling him during, because I had to throw in another format just to fit everything I wanted to fit on him. But yeah, it's not anything wild or crazy. It's just some weird mods we don't normally use. With that, there's not really much else to explain. Of course, you can do this with a variety of weapons. As I said, your output damage doesn't really matter for the actual boss part of the fight, but just making sure that you can kill the Murmurs comfortably while doing shield gating stuff is going to be pretty much the overarching goal. With that, we can jump in to the actual footage from the whole mission. I'm going to skip around a bit as necessary, but I'm going to show the whole thing so you get the entire idea of what you need to do. Of course, with some comments about how to avoid certain pitfalls. Okay, as I stated before, this is a Fervo assassination on the steel path. Those are all required. Make sure you are solo or invite only. As you can see, I am in the top left there. As long as you complete the mission by yourself entirely, do not invite anyone. You will get the award as the different frame that you are. For that, we're of course jumping into this mission. We're just going to skip in the extra parts here. So, first and foremost, we need to get the probes that are just required for this mission's completion. Grabbing one of these and sticking them into these little terminals here. These little terminals will give you the eyes that you need to collect. They will, of course, take a moment in order to pulse out. They'll say the Vitrium Seeks, and then it'll give you all these little eyes. You need to collect 30 of these normally, as you can see the counter in the top left. But what you are actually going to be doing over the course of this mission is you'll get to 30, and then you will need to continue to collect eyes until you have collected 60. It's going to force you to move between locations a bit, but in general, like, it's pretty cut and dry. You just need to collect 60 eyes instead of 30 eyes. When it tells you to move on before that, don't. You also will normally, I will say, have to run past the actual boss arena to get to the other section where you're going to get your final eyes, and that's pretty normal just for how the map generates. It's not always going to be that way, but the boss needs to be activated specifically by you in the arena, so you can walk through it no problem. The boss will not automatically trigger. You can see Worm there with the Verglass helping quite a bit as well, just to burn down the different enemies that need to be burned down. And of course, the Torrid doing its usual exceedingly good job at killing enemies. With this, you kind of get how this is going. I'm just going to skip through this because it's, you know, a long process where you're going to be waiting for these to find more eyes. You're going to be building these up, going through, getting the different eyes, yada, yada. You go through, get more eyes. Eyes are happening. More eyes are happening. Here we go. We're getting eyes. We're getting eyes. There it is. It's crazy. We're getting so many eyes. This is a very long process. It's much longer intro than it is for the tank, even though the tank has a few more steps to it. You will get the 30 eyes, which you can see me grabbing here, and it'll tell you, go summon the Fragmented Tide. Do not go summon the Fragmented Tide. At this point, you instead want to just go to the yellow marks that you can see on the map there, grab more of these. It will mark where the terminals are, as you can see there on your map, for going and collecting more eyes. And then, you guessed it, we are going to go collect more eyes. That was going to be what we're doing. We are collecting more eyes. You'll have to do a few different ones of these, of grabbing these and just doing the usual eye collection. As I said, you'll have to go past the boss, which is what I'm doing here, and go up into this section, which is going to be where I'm going to grab more eyes. This is all pretty simple. You're just dealing with the enemies regularly, grabbing the eyes, normal stuff. Moving on. At this point, it is worth noting that we have all 60 eyes. This is roughly 10 minutes into the mission, because that's just kind of how long it takes. So there's that. Then we can go to the boss. So, before we get started with this, it is worth noting, this arena, this is the best arena for doing this fight. It has a very large ceiling. It's very easy to avoid as many of the attacks that are really avoidable as possible on the actual Murmur fight. There are 3 different total arenas. One of them is indoors. It is inside. It is a covered roof. That one is actually not so bad. I had to do that for a couple of the runs because you can hover at the top of that ceiling. It becomes kind of annoying to see everything that the boss is doing, but while you're hovering on the ceiling, you don't really need to be seeing what the boss is doing anyway. The one that sucks is the one where you're kind of just down in a pit. It's basically like this, but a much more like tiny and contained area. And you have a very hard time jumping up and hitting the ceiling of it because the ceiling will actually invisibly push you back down into the arena. That one sucks for this. If you can, you want to do it in the ones that are not that arena. Obviously, there's a 10-minute lead-in time for that, which kind of sucks, but hopefully you mostly get this arena, which is the best one for this. Now, actually starting the fight, super simple. You just go up and you summon the thing, as is normal, as you are wont to do. Now, it will always start with the Fragmented Tide. Archititron, really, really good at this. As the enemies spawn in, like, it'll build up the... You build up the combo with, like, the first couple hits, basically. You can very quickly eliminate them just because, you know, influence and the very high damage of the Titron. You can see it just instantly clearing these big waves and really not... It's just super fast. That's going to do its same job later on in this fight. And then we're going to get, of course, to this part. It's worth noting that on the way into this fight, it's good to charge up the Latum. I actually don't remember if I had charged it up as I went in. And you can see the Latum here. I did not charge it up as I went in, so I did make a mistake in this run. But you can see that, like, whenever these little straggler Xmas enemies show up, this Jade Xmas, I would say, is more probably threatening than the actual boss itself. So you want to have the Latum charged up and then able to use its charged up fire to just very quickly eliminate any Xmas that just wander into the fight, as that'll happen over the course of it. Now, thing that's notable, you see these hands that are all over the ground. Those are contact damage, so you want to do your best to never ever land on them, because when you land on them, you're usually going to have to burn your rolling guard to save yourself from dying to whatever hit of damage comes next. So do your best to not land on those. Of course, you're spending as much time in the air as possible, but you do have to come down periodically. So that's just worth noting. As you saw me do there. These shots that you see in the far side there, this like line that's pointed towards me from the other side of the arena, there's some fun stuff you can do with that, where you can have that be aimed at the boss and the boss will like get stunned. That doesn't let you do any more damage or anything though, so just avoiding it is more than fine. You can see me here just like trying to get my Latum charged so that whenever any Xmas show up later, it'll be nice and easy to deal with them. The orbs that are all along the super boss's body, those are also weak points. You can also shoot it in its like weird shaped like egg head that it has. So the Latum does have a few points to charge up on. You can also see Worm here doing a pretty good job of applying some more heat procs. Thing I want to note here, this attack has like Dark Souls 2 level tracking, so you're basically never going to be able to avoid it. So whenever you get hit by it, if you don't think you're going to get hit again, just like let your shields recharge. And if you do think you're going to get hit again, you better roll. And that's just kind of the way that this is. You can see it just like turn on a dime here. It'll even do a full 180 to hit you with that. So usually it's not even worth thinking about avoiding, because it is pretty much just going to hit you. It's a very large area that it affects. I think you'd have to get to the complete other end of the arena to really avoid it, which is honestly usually not even worth your time. You can see me here dealing with another one of the little snake guys. Those are probably the most annoying Xmas you can get here. This was actually the only run, I think, where I kept getting those guys showing up. Usually it's a lot more forgiving, and you'll just get like kind of the weird floaty dudes that don't really do much whenever they enter the fight. But you can see here just like the level of nothing that this is. I mean, like, you know, we're at 1,400 heat procs on this. It's like, you know, keeping up the damage or whatever. But there's really not much to do. You're just pretty much hanging out, waiting for that health bar to go down at the rate that it goes down. You can see even more of the, like, annoying Snake XMI are here. And, like, you can shoot the turret at this, shoot the Latum at this. It's not going to go any faster one way or another. You could really just let your Sentinel do the whole thing, and it probably wouldn't be any faster or slower that way either. Yeah, that's pretty much what's going to be going on in part 1 of this fight, although part 1 and part 2 are pretty much the same. So we will skip ahead to not waste your time with just the fight being a timer. Like, it's the same thing for a while here. You can see the thing continuing down at like a very even and normal pace, as it kind of just has the one pace that the health bar goes down. Once we get to the midpoint, you can see there's a couple of Xmas stragglers around or whatnot that I'm still cleaning up with the Latum. But yeah, the Fragmented Tide will go into its next phase. This party just like wants to dig more and like do some jumps that it can do. It'll spawn all the little guys again, which are very easily cleaned up by the Titron. But you can also clean these guys up with the Torrid or the Latum, really whatever you prefer. I find it to be easiest to do with the Titron. We'll have a few moves that it adds once you're in this phase. This like swirling energy thing is pretty low threat. Usually just backing away from it is more than enough to not really make it a big deal. You can see that it will just miss you if you're moving at like a lazy pace as you fly through the air with this build. So pretty easy stuff overall here. Then otherwise we're just doing what we were doing, which is just applying heat procs, shooting it with the turret or whatnot, and really just hanging out. Worm Prime comes back here, which is nice for us. Still doing this like hammer attack here, which is just annoying. We do have another more annoying Xmas here, which is these guys that have the 3 arms. Latum is also fantastic at dealing with them, though, and just cleaning them out of this. You can see this is one of the attacks where like it digs. That attack usually can't hit you whenever you're high up, but it does usually get paired with him summoning a bunch of guys. This like rotating attack will cause a bunch of explosions on the ground. You're flying, so those usually aren't going to hit you, but don't land on them. Pretty basic stuff here. Otherwise, it doesn't really do anything crazy except summon more dudes. Torrid, again, very good at killing all the dudes. In lieu of that, the Titron will kill all the dudes. Yeah, really just pretty cut and dry, basic stuff here. Using the Latum to, like, you know, clean off any Xmas you need to clean off. On the sides of the arena, specifically in this arena, you can see this guy here. These dudes will hurl stuff at you. Their names is actually like Hurling Murmur or something like that. They're pretty accurate and can pop your shields off fairly easily. So if you see them, you do want to make sure those guys get eliminated, as if there's a bunch of them, you are usually going to die to them. You can see them just like hucking those boulders. They're pretty accurate with it. If you're going just a little slow, you can see there I got dinged by one of them because I haven't noticed it yet. But yeah, those guys are a good thing to pay attention to and keep a lookout for. And you could, I mean, you can see the health bar goes down at 1 rate. So, you know, do what you do. I don't think there's anything else really to note in this fight, and I do actually really mean that very seriously. Oh, there's this attack, this big like orb attack. Just get away from it. The boss becomes invincible when it's doing this. It doesn't actually really matter if you get away from it. You can like roll towards it if you want to. But yeah, that's like what's going on whenever it makes the big orb. Kill all the guys. Like usually that causes it to like bring all the guys near it, and then you can just kill all of its ads really easily. But yeah. This is a fight of all time. It truly is. It truly is a thing. It's a super boss, right? Yeah, you know. It kind of is just attenuated, and we can skip on through here, and you know, yada yada. Same few attacks that you've seen, and you know, there's a big orb again. You know, doing that stuff. Put some more heat procs on it. It'll do its, you know, rotate here, make some explosions or whatever. And yeah, just like, you know, spamming rolling guard, making sure your shields come back, getting Aegis procs, you know, doing the usual thing. You can see there it dies, and I get the Evolve on Accolade glyph. From here, it's pretty easy, just like get out of the mission. Of course, just using the operator here to just go a little faster, which is, of course, nice at different points in the mission. If you're having trouble actually getting the eyes earlier on in this mission, the operator can be very helpful for that, as you can just kind of directly teleport to stuff. But yeah, shortened down thanks to a lot of skipping. But yeah, that's about a 20-minute mission for each and every single one of the different Warframes for it. So it's going to take about 2 hours if you just get it on the first try. You can also see you have that Mana Sumdali that you'll also get from this fight. That one is not exclusive, and as I said before, that comes from just completing this as anybody and with any amount of players. But the Accolade itself does need you to be solo on Steel Path as the Warframe in the Accolade. But yeah, that is the Super Murmur. Hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If you want to go do the Apex tank stuff, which I think is considerably more fun and more interesting, that video is also available. And yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video and are enjoying your new Accolade glyphs. All right. Hey, turns out you have to record these more often than I have been. My huge apologies, but thank you very much to all of the patrons who have been sticking with. It is very much appreciated because things got weird during the streamathon. But thank you to Athean, Angel SPM, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Canalathra, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Harsthorne, Josh, Bluzanth, Mikokel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Skur, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Zeraphir, Alex Parnham, Club World 3, JC4 Science, and Wodat01, and of course all of the other $5 and $2 patrons. It is extremely appreciated. I'll try and keep this more updated now that the 4 months of Streamathon is over. Good lord. But yeah, lots more guides happening. I think I'm going to be looking to get the site guides like kind of done for at least the CPR, and that's kind of the plan going forward if you're curious on updates for the channel.